Hello there, my name is Annette with Sunbeam Fabric Art. Welcome to my channel. Did you have a Fisher-Price garage back in the 70s? I did not, but my cousin did, and I was very jealous. Well, recently I found one at an estate sale. This Fisher-Price garage is going to live at our house. When the grandkids come over, they can play with it, but maybe Grams will play with it from time to time, who knows. I drew out my idea of how big a tote for this set needed to be. That makes it easy for us to get the toys out when the kids are here. I measured the height of this Fisher-Price garage and the bottom. I decided to try and use up the rest of my scrap bolt to make the tote for this Fisher-Price toy. The first thing I had to do was make some straight edges. This remnant was not wide enough to make the tote that I envisioned, so I cut some nice straight edges and stitched them together to get the pieces big enough. I will have one long narrow piece that will go all the way around the tote, and then a bottom that I will affix. In my scrap batting container, I did find pieces that were large enough. I got a piece that's large enough for the surrounding, and I've got a piece large enough for the base of this tote. I also picked up this blue floral print at a thrift store, and it was plenty long. I think I got about 6 yards of it for $5. Anyway, I'm using that for the interior of the lining. I made myself a quilt sandwich with the lining, the batting, and my scrap bolt fabric. And this is the piece, this long narrow piece that will go all the way around. I did get out my curved basting pins to pin my quilt sandwich together. Next, I swapped out the foot on my sewing machine for this walking foot that came with my sewing machine. Makes it a little bit easier when you're going through lots and lots of layers. With that foot swapped out, I started quilting my quilt sandwich. I started in the middle and just started going down this narrow, long piece that is going to be the outside of my bag using a serpentine stitch. Here's a look at that quilting. Next, I stitched 2 of my scrap pieces together, right sides together, to make a piece big enough for my base. Once I had that stitched and pressed, I built the quilt sandwich that will be the base of this project. This piece was small enough, I didn't really worry about pinning it. I just started stitching on the bottom, and I started doing this spiral around and around and around from the inside all the way to the outside. Here is a look at that finished base for this bag. Next, it was time to trim up my pieces so I have nice straight edges to attach and finish this project. Getting a straight edge on one side is pretty easy. However, when it was time to turn this around and get a nice straight edge on the other, it is really too wide for any of my rulers. So what you'll see me doing as I flip this around, I'm combining 2 rulers so I get the nice measurement that I want. I'm lining up my 12.5-inch ruler on the 11-inch line, and then in combination with my 6-inch ruler, what I'm getting is a 17-inch wide piece of fabric that is going to be the outside surround of my toy tote. I also squared up the base of this bag. The way I'm planning to put this together, I'm going to be stitching right sides together. I'm going to leave a little overlap on my first section, and I'm going to go all the way around the bag, attaching my sides to my base. So here you see I'm clipping down that surround piece of fabric. My base is on top. When I get to the corner, I clipped off a little triangle at the corner, and then I just kept clipping this surround piece around the base of my toy tote. This is a little bit fiddly. It would probably work a little bit better if I had cut a bigger curve instead of just cutting off a little tab, but I made it work. I didn't want to cut off too much because I was worried that maybe my little toy garage would not fit nicely into the bag. Well, unfortunately, when I got to the last side, guess what? I came up short. I decided to just make do and attach another piece of this scrap fabric to make it long enough. I had already made another piece because I thought I was going to put a cover over this toy tote. So I had some piece of quilted fabric all ready to go, and I just cut off what I needed, attached it on the fly. I didn't undo the clips. I kept everything clipped in place, and I just stitched on this extra piece to give me what I needed. I went over the entire seam a second time with a blanket stitch. I went ahead and finished clipping the surround to the base of the bag, and I did have about 5 or 6 inches extra that I cut off. The beginning and the end overlap about 2 or 3 inches. Now it's time to start sewing the surrounding fabric to the base. I'm starting about 1 inch or 2 past the corner where that overlap is, and I'm going to go all the way around to the end. I'm taking a nice wide seam here of about 1/2 inch. Going around the curves on these corners is a little bit tricky, but just take your time. If you need a stylus to keep your fabric in place as you go around the curve, do whatever you need to do, but pins, clips, all that can help out. Once I got all the way around, I did go back over the entire seam that I had stitched with a blanket stitch. And again, I left myself a couple of inches on both sides of that final seam I'm going to sew. Now this method left me with one open side seam. So I lined up this side seam at the top of the tote and started clipping this seam into place. Once it was clipped in place, I stitched down the side, again using about 1/2 inch seam. Then I went back over that seam with a blanket stitch. The next thing I did was lay my bag with the lining side out, and I made some measurements and pinned my straps. I'm just using nylon straps that I got online and pinning those to the inside to make a comfortable handle to carry this tote around. This bag is so large, I was able to do these handles after I put the bag together. Most of the bags I make, I put these handles on before I finish stitching the sides. I'm getting ready to stitch these handles down, but I am going to leave it open about an inch at the top because I'm going to bind the top of this bag. I'm stitching a U shape around my strap and stopping before I get to the top of the bag. You can also make X's at the top and the bottom to make it a little bit more secure if you like. Now I'm ready to bind the top of this bag. To start my binding, I like to fold down at a 45-degree angle and then fold it back in half. This creates a little pocket, and into that pocket I will be tucking in the end of the binding once I get all the way around. I put a couple of pins in where that pocket is, and then I'm going to begin stitching this to the inside of the bag about 2-3 inches past the pocket. Once I make it all the way around the top of this bag, I am going to cut the tail, and I'm going to cut it at an angle that matches the angle of the pocket with a little extra past the edge of the pocket so I can tuck it in and hide any raw edges. Once that binding is all stitched to the inside of the bag, I flip it around to the outside of the bag where I can top stitch it down with a straight stitch or a decorative stitch. It's really your choice. You do want to make sure your bag straps are out of the way and you don't get those caught in your binding. Once the binding is completely stitched down, all we have to do is finish stitching our straps to the bag. The next thing I did was use my little wooden tool to poke out corners on this bag and make sure all the seams were nice and flat. Then it was time for the real test. Does the garage toy fit inside the bag? And good news, yes, it fit in this bag very easily. Plenty of room to add other Fisher-Price toys and little people. This toy tote's going to be great for carrying this item up and down stairs and also for keeping everything together. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you back again real soon.